Welcome, everyone, to Into the Nexus, episode 399. I'm Kyle Fergusson. Garrett is on a rainy vacation. It's raining on him at Thunder Mountain right now at Disney World. I saw the tweet. But it's Florida, so it'll change. I am joined this week by Not Paradox. Not Paradox, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, no, in Florida, I mean, it rains every day at noon, right? So
Exactly.
the rain will end soon. No, it's probably ended by the time we're talking. No, thank you so much for having me back. It's always fun to be on here. We were just talking, I think the last time I was on was around February. So it's exciting to be back. And we were talking about all sorts of stuff, but since you just mentioned episode 399, we're talking about what might be on episode 400. I just saw the Broodlord, and I just wrote in the notes Broody the Broodlord.
Gotta have him on.
You gotta have that brought up somewhere. But yeah, no, I'm definitely excited to be back, and I'm excited to see what you guys do for your 400. Yeah, I mean, how are you doing so far today?
Doing good. Yeah, we could episode 400 could honestly be a patch show that's like very, nuts and bolts serious. But then there's also the stream later that night. So for everyone at home, we normally do a bonanza where we play games and just play games. It's kind of our goal, play with the patrons. That night, so next Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time, we'll be live over at twitch.tv/amovetv having a sort of celebration. There'll be games in there. We'll play some games. But there's also going to be some viewing parties, all sorts of cool stuff. Looking forward to sharing with you all in that episode 400. But I'm doing fabulous. This has been a really cool week of Heroes, let alone CCL. In my personal games, I've gone from Sylvanas one trick to Stukov one trick.
Okay.
I'm just end of the season, just like wandering around randomly, like following my passion. Little Mephisto here, a little Sylvanas over here. I love Sylvanas. I'm really loving it. But I'm realizing just how nice CC is.
Yeah.
Because I do the whole mind control, auto attack build, and like a Varian being like this, and you're like, well, what a wonderful idea, Varian. I'll mind control that in the bonus damage. But really, I think highlighted by the ongoing CCL tournament, Stukov has the easiest build in the world to do right now.
Yeah.
Previously, the reactive ballista spores, not that it was impossible, but it was extra thought process, extra button, extra play style.
It did. And it was a risk every time because your risk was a little bit of setup. You would, if you figured you were going to be doing like the reactive, you would want to set up, especially like the level 7 talent too, where you only need to hit one person with your W. You'd always want to set up with your Q, get it spreading, and just try for a W. And it kind of came to the same playstyle every time. You'd have the reactive as kind of an activatable to get an extra person if you needed to, or to save yourself if you made a mistake. And in both cases, it kind of just created this like almost linear playstyle that was difficult and kind of high risk, that you could kind of answer the risk a little bit like every 60 seconds or so. So I think the new play styles, you can take the same risks, but it's actually pretty difficult.
It's just so easy.
Yeah,
it's great. Like the old having to get the reacto took skill, of course, and it was a very impressive thing. You could always see the Stukov who was used to it because they were firing their weighted pustules from level 1 and then doing the hand under, like they never wanted to break that practice. Sure. But now you don't even take that talent, so you don't even have to worry about it, and you just put hands under things at increased range with a extra second on the back end, the spreading hand. Like it's just so easy, and it's so powerful, and it's early pickable.
It really is. Yeah, Stukov in his current playstyle is, I mean, he's a lot easier. You can still go the reactive if you want. Like if you've got a diver, it still definitely has a lot of potential. But man, low blow is a lot of fun, and just in general, a lot of his current playstyle is really fun. You can still go the root, but since they nerfed it and they buffed the other talents, like you only have to hit one person 6 times now to get a reset, or 2 people 3 times. So if there's 2 people in your lurking arm, I think you get a reset in like a second and a half. which is pretty fast. If there's 3 people, you get a reset in a second. So you can get your resets rather quickly. It's really interesting. But yeah, overall, the new Stukov is pretty fun to play. And if you guys aren't bringing him into Storm League yet, you should certainly try.
You also get that It Hungers gives 20% lurking arm range. That 8 hits that you talked about, very, very easy to do. And then you get mana cost refunded on top of it. So you're not even working that hard. You're still thinking, but you're not even working that hard. It's a little, I mean, you can't just dive right in. Stukov is definitely one of those Magic the Gathering kind of heroes,
right,
where you look at the text and you go, okay, so that's the ability. And then talents pop up and you go, no. This is a lot. I'm going to go back to playing Anduin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when I was coaching people a lot, whenever Stukov was brought up, they would always either really underestimate or really overestimate how difficult Stukov was. Generally, people who didn't read everything, they just saw like the Q was bouncing around. They're like, he's so easy. Like, you're just naturally healing everyone. I said, yeah, but like your Q heal is not that strong unless you use your trait. And in order to get the most out of your trait, you have to use your W with your talents. And I said, it gets a little complicated. Or I'd have people that are like, oh man, I see Stukov's combos and I just don't even understand it. And it's like, there's ways to learn those combos and be a little bit easier at them. But he's definitely one of those heroes that is either deceptively easier or harder to play than people think. But I do think the new E builds are definitely fun, to say the least. And they're a lot easier than his other builds.
It's interesting how quickly this season of CCL was defined in that way. And I think for me, the biggest surprise, and we talked about it a little last week, was Lunara. Just suddenly, tons of really, really powerful Lunara. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's just entirely based around Choking Pollen's buff.
Yeah, I mean, Choking Pollen answered one major problem that Lunara had, but it answered it so well that you didn't even need the ult anymore. So generally, like, Lunara, her old playstyle was really like, let's counter healers who can't keep up with wide slow damage. They're like, so Uther, Karazim, Morales, if you saw them early picked, you could pick Lunara, and you're basically forcing the enemy team to pick a second healer. And so the kind of the play style that they had was, okay, overwhelm them with damage and use Leaping Strike to get the burst that you're lacking. But now you get the burst at level 7, which already is a big kind of buff to Lunara. But you can now take Thornwood Vines, so your ult, instead of needing to use your ult to be the burst and get into a bad position, now your ult could be the applying damage to all the enemies, and you get to stay in a safe position. So her playstyle, like what she brought to the team, is still the same. She just brings it earlier now. She brings it's safer than she brought before. And there's a couple different playstyles now. You can play her a little bit more utility, where you're dismounting everyone and you're slowing them all from really far away. And then you can lead the burst on whatever your team's attacking. Or you can play her aggressively, potentially even still going Thornwood Vines or going Leaping Strike, have enough damage 100 to 0 a target and bounce back right over to your team again. And you can kind of readjust as needed, or what your team needs. So she's a lot safer to pick earlier in the draft, where before you only wanted to pick her if they had already picked their healer and she works well into their healer. Now you're safe to pick her early in the draft because you can change your playstyle. If they are major AoE healers, you go more single target. And if they're more single target, you go AoE. You bring the utility to every team. And so she's really great in a lot of different maps. I definitely think that Choking Pollen brought out something in Lunara that she was definitely missing, that kept her away from the competitive scene. I mean, she already had a good win rate in like just Storm League games, but this definitely brought her out in the competitive scene, and it's just what she needed, really.
I want to highlight that for a moment. Let's point people over to your YouTube, where you made recently a Lunara video off of the CCL plays.
Yeah. So that video kind of says what I just said a little bit, and it talks about how kind of a little bit the history of when Lunara was used, And then we talk heavily, I talk heavily about what made her popular again. And then I also go through and kind of explain throughout this video what the pros are using her for and kind of what might be different with pro play versus your games. Like I think level 13, I recommend almost all the pros take the cleanse. But in your standard games, I don't think you're going to be able to get as much value out of the cleanse as you will like the longer slow duration or the lower cooldown on your W. So I also kind of explain how like sometimes things are great in pro play that are not so great in your standard games, and you need to make those adaptations. So it's a pretty good video, I would say, about explaining like how to not only learn why they're playing those heroes, but also how to adapt it for your own gameplay.
I got to interview Hasuobs this week for the CCL.
Oh yeah.
So that'll be part of the halftime show. But a little spoiler for what he was talking about over there. That's why they can run so much Stukov as well, because of that cleanse on Lunara. And I thought that was fascinating, that you can make up for a support with Lunara now. And you mentioned there that the Thornwood Vine. So why wouldn't somebody want to say Lunara's problem was burst? Now I want Leaping Strike to just double down on that.
It's just if you need to double down. Okay. So leaping is still used here and there, but what happens is you have enough burst that if your tank's going to CC someone with Choking Pollen, you have just enough damage to finish off that target with your team. So you don't really need Leaping Strike as long as they've got the marks that they need, the stacks of your poison that they need. So what ends up happening is once you really in pro play, once you have enough, you don't need any more. Like overkill is not necessary in pro play because you have just enough to get the kill that you need, just enough to get the camp you need, just enough to clear the wave that you need. Where outside of pro play, you're going to need a little bit more because your team's not going to be doing what they're supposed to be doing. So in pro play, you just need enough to kill a target, and that's what they have with the level 7 talent. After that, you just decide, okay, well, what's going to get us in an easier position to always be able to do that? And that's where the Vines has been gaining a lot of popularity, is because you can dismount everyone from really far away. You can slow everyone. You can get your marks to where they need to be pretty fast while staying in a safe position. But don't leave Leaping Strike to be like it's just completely outclassed. That's in professional play. That's when they have enough damage that they need. But if for some reason you're in a situation where you're like, hey, we have Lunara, but we also have like, let's say a really slow damage dealer and a bruiser that's more of a tank, you might need to go, okay, we still kind of need that burst. We need that guaranteed burst. And you'll still see Leaping Strike being picked here and there. But as far as I would say most games right now in the competitive scene, that Choking Pollen gives you just enough burst to take out the targets you need. And so that's why people are just going the Vines now.
The other thing that really stood out to me, and I'm afraid is going to cause an outbreak of Li-Mings, was the Li-Ming solo boss on Alterac Pass. I didn't know that was possible until this weekend.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. So one of the members of Diamond Hands, I believe, is Kelsier. Kelsier was showing me a video he was working on, and I really hope I'm not like burning it. And he's still working on it. But Kelsier showed that you could solo boss on almost any hero in the game. And it just might take a while. Like when he was doing it with Diablo, it took him like, I think he said like 40 minutes to solo a boss.
Okay.
And so it's just like, there's sometimes that it's just unreasonable. But if you're playing a DPS and you know how to do it, and you can do it in a way that the enemies aren't expecting, that's kind of the best part. You know, I heard there was a competitive player that said this. I can't remember the name right now, but he said that every team needs 2 tricks. If you're trying to trick the enemies, you do 1 trick, and it's usually not enough to end the game against pros. So every team needs 2 tricks, and that's kind of a good one. So as long as you have a second one, if you're trying to be sneaky, then that's the way to do it. If the enemy beats you in drafts, that's okay, as long as you can do something that they're not expecting. And so that's the fun part about CCL and competitive play, is when everyone's playing at their best, there's still so many areas you can outplay the enemies, but you got to get a lot more creative than just outplaying in your normal games.
if you're looking to do this from home, of course, this was 30K Dino who was showing this off. So
Yeah.
extremely skilled player.
Oh, yeah.
Extremely well timed play to the point that they were dodging the auto attacks of the mountain giant on Alterac Pass. But they were also using the teleport to sort of reset the stomp and get it to stomp more, it seemed.
Yeah, I don't know the exact method. I think for the most part, if you take Ether Walker, you can teleport like every 2 seconds, and the mountain giant attacks pretty slow. So you can kind of reset one auto attack, and then you have, I think, 0.5 second window that you just need to make him run during that 0.5 second window to make it worth it. So basically you teleport right as he's attacking, and then you're okay for a second, and then you need to start moving at least after half a second so that he's running for 1.5 seconds until you have your teleport back, and then you can walk up and right as he's about to attack, you teleport again. As far as how they triggered the multiple stomps or anything, that is beyond me. I'll have to watch the game a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, sometimes knowing those, and these are one of those things I'd say in Magic, there's some decks that's like, this only wins once, right?
And I love those decks.
There's some decks that you play that once you learn the gimmick, you never let that gimmick happen again. And this is one of those things where once they realize that if anyone's missing from the map, that could lead to a boss. That's something that every team's going to account for a little bit. It's going to be tricky, and I think we're going to start valuing vision a little bit better, which again comes back to Lunara with that wisp, being able to just throw a wisp down to bot lane and stop the scary thing that's about to happen before it happens is going to be really valuable, and we'll start seeing a lot more usage of vision than I think we've seen before, especially on Alterac now.
Well, is there anything that's really stood out to you? I brought up Stukov. Li Ming here was kind of that surprise. So much Tychus. Just a solid siege machine with that Odin. But did anything cross your mind while watching in the past 3 weeks?
I think the biggest thing that I've been seeing a lot is the high priority of healers that don't have cleanse. It's so what happens right now is the meta of the healers that we have, and I've seen the casters even say this. They say like it seems like whoever gets the Stukov or Brightwing wins the game. But what we keep seeing is that we'll have Stukov, Brightwing getting banned or picked, and then we'll have like people pick Malfurion and Deckard as backups. Both heroes that don't have great cleanses, right? Malfurion's cleanse doesn't get rid of silence, which is why we've been seeing that priority of Varian and Sylvanas, because both of their taunt and mind control are considered silences. We're kind of lacking that. And so what I'm curious about is naturally, like, Lucio was kind of the old answer to that. But he's fallen out of the meta, and I'm curious to see why he's fallen out of the meta. I mean, in this particular game we're looking at, he was banned. But I'm curious why he's fallen so far out of the meta that he's not the answer to taunt Varian every time. But also, like, there's a lot of underrated healers that I still think just aren't getting the kind of the showing that they should. I still think that Whitemane, while she's risky to draft, is probably one of the best like burst, anti-combo healers in the game. Like, Uther is generally the best anti-burst because of the armor he grants, but you can grant even more armor every 60 seconds, which is generally how often fights are happening in the competitive scene. You'll have either one person who'll lead to a pick with a Varian, a pull, or anything like that, which she has a 45-second cooldown cleanse, right? So she can stop most of the picks. And then when people hard engage, let's say they go in with a Warden's Cage, she can give everyone 40 armor and a big heal, and that's usually enough for them to get out of the situation that they were in. And if you want to continue fighting, kind of counter engage, 40 armor marks everyone on your team, and then you can then use your W with a trait potentially to heal everyone up to full. and then your team can counter engage. So I do think that probably the underrated competitive healer right now is White Mane, just because the low cooldown cleanse, it is low range, but still in competitive, if you're a good healer, you'll kind of know where the CC is going to hit. I think that would be a surprising one. I saw a game earlier that the 2 cleanse heroes were picked early, and then Varian was like snap picked, and I was like, well, this would be a great situation to just pick anyone with a cleanse, right? And then they ended up picking Malfurion, and every single fight went exactly the same. Varian charged in, taunted, Sylvanas mind controlled, they killed the target, and then they were down a target. Taunt was back up in 15 seconds, and the other team basically gave the objective. And it happened over and over and over and over. And I was like, if you just didn't pick Malfurion and you picked Rhaegar, you at least wouldn't die to the first taunt.
That's
but
true.
If you picked White Mane, at least you would have 2 answers and a lower cooldown cleanse. I mean, even Lily has a low cooldown cleanse. Wouldn't really recommend her too much in competitive because she doesn't answer the other problems. But I was like, I think that's the thing that I'm seeing that's really underrated right now, that's kind of missing out. The other thing that I would say I'm seeing like a lot of is like, let's see. Let me see if you posted the thing. Like I'm seeing a lot of like Dehaka's coming back, which is awesome. And I think a lot of people are saying it's because of Lurker Strain, and that build is really interesting. I've been doing, it's funny, I've been breaking down a lot of games with this build, and I've been trying to see where that talent is leading to something that not having that talent wouldn't have gotten. But then I'm also trying to see, you're removing 2 potential important talents. And so I've been trying to figure out every game where Lurker Strain actually is leading to a win where the other talents wouldn't have, and every game that it's not. And what I'm finding is that it seems like people are taking it too much. And I know this will be a little controversial for sure. I think it's a good talent, and I do think it'll likely see a little bit of nerfs, but it's actually one of the lowest win rate talents on like Hot Slogs or Heroes Profile, just for like standard games. Even if you sort by masters, it's like 7% lower than like the next talent down, than like Hero Stalker. And so that was one of the things. But if you're looking specifically at CCL games, it's like Hero Stalker is barely being picked, which in this case the win rate is pretty low. But I think it's just because people that are picking it don't know when to pick it, and everyone else just is always picking Lurker Strain. And so it's kind of interesting to see. And I think that's one of them that I think I'm kind of just breaking down a lot of the games, and I see areas where I'm like, this definitely led to a kill where it otherwise wouldn't have. And then I see a couple areas where people are picking it and they're just dying too fast. They're not getting any value from Lurker Strain, and Hero Stalker would have led to them winning. And so it's just one of those trends that I think I'm seeing, that I think with actual game breakdown, you'll see that it's not always the best, but it certainly is a strong talent. But the cool part about that is it did kind of shake up this season of CCL, shook up the solo lane roster pool quite a bit. We don't see like Sonya, Hogger,
no
Diva every game. Like we see Dehaka, we're seeing a lot of Chen. We're seeing like some weird stuff this season, which is really fun. I'm really excited to see that.
What's with Chen? Yeah. What is that? What is that accomplishing? What is it going for? Because I'm seeing that as well, and its mobility and its responsiveness seems to be working very well for them, but I'm not sure why it's happening in the draft.
So I think Chen does a few things. I think he's a lane bully. He wins like probably 80% of the matchups in the lane if you need to win the lane. But he also does a couple things interesting in team fights. You can go in 2 different directions when you play Chen. You can play where you just shield your allies, giving them like a pretty significant shield, and then jump in and barrel the team. Barrel's also such a low cooldown, you can use it to counter what enemies are trying to do. And so if like a Leoric on the opposing team entombs, you can jump in and barrel and just knock everyone away and counter every entomb. And so he's seeing, I mean, not too much, but he is seeing a little bit more play. But I think overall we're just seeing a wider range of soul laners than we saw in the previous seasons. But yeah, he can adapt based on where he needs to go. Currently, I mean, the season's still brand new with season 3, so naturally all the stats are going to be pretty limited. But yeah, it's fascinating to see kind of what we're seeing right now. Previous week games were rather interesting too. I mean, what I noticed also, another one, Garrosh has been seeing really low priority, but the games that I've been seeing him in are really high impact. Like the game that he won, it was like almost 100% Garrosh that caused him to win, and it was huge. I mean, of course, it's never 100%, but he was significant in that, and I think that's something that that I feel like is kind of lacking. But yeah, overall, I mean, CCL, it's fresh this season. That's what I'll say, is it's fresh this season. We're not seeing a lot going on, but what we are seeing is just a little bit different from the last 2 seasons.
We got a question from you from the Discord asking from Dax, who do you think are some sleeper heroes that we may see become part of the home meta from the CCL standpoint?
So from the home meta, are we meaning like just things that are kind of missing in CCL right now? Or are we thinking things that might be kind of sleeper for like all competitive play?
I think more along the lines of what's happening in CCL that we're not noticing that is going to become meta at home, maybe over time.
Interesting. Let me pull up the most recent 5 games in CCL. You know what? Is they're finally getting onto, and I said this a little bit ago, probably, I don't even know, season 2, season 1 even. I said that Maiev has only received buffs since HEC, and in HEC she was 100% pick and ban. And I was really wondering where the Maiev is. I feel like we're finally starting to see a lot of Maiev, and that's going to trickle down for sure. I would say the other thing that's going to start trickling down more often is we're seeing them running very beefy comps, right? And we've been seeing like Triple Bruiser for a long time, but people I think are getting more bold with their beefy comps now, and I do think that's going to trickle down just a little bit. Seeing, I mean, a lot of these teams, if we're looking at, like the most previous games, we've been seeing, like this team ran, and there's like, what was it? Blaze, let's see, Blaze, Maiev, and Medivh, and then the other team had Diablo, Uther, Leoric, and Joanna, right? And it's like these teams are getting so much tankier than we've seen in the past. And it's just because bruisers can do such a disruption to assassins now that the things that would normally answer high health targets, it's easier to answer by just adding something tanky again. The fact that like Yrel and Dehaka can just jump on your backline, and Yrel, Dehaka, Chen, I mean, most of the bruisers that are being played right now can just jump on backline without risking much. They can just go right to your backline, threaten to kill a target, and they can generally just get away safely. And so the backline needs to be people who have like their own survivability, or they need to be people who can stay really far back, or you just shift adding more beef to your team too. So I think that'll trickle down quite a bit. I definitely think the Lunara build that we're seeing in pro play, we're only going to start seeing. People are still kind of doing leaping strike. People are still kind of doing the spreading pollen, or the what is it called? It's not spreading pollen. The level 7 that you throw out, splintered spears. We're like still seeing a lot of that. So I think that's probably the main thing that we're going to see different. Slowly start trickling down into kind of like the NGS type things. Also, like, I think the other thing too is we're going to start seeing some things that might be a little bit too high execution for people in lower ranks. Like what I started seeing happen really fast is CCL players started playing Genji again. We've been seeing a lot of Genjis. And right after CCL players started playing a lot of Genjis, I started seeing a lot of teams in like NGS, like divisions like A, B, and C start bringing their Genjis back out. But the problem that I was seeing is like the drafts that people were playing Genji in CCL were basically like the best case scenarios for Genjis. It was like, we have just enough damage to finish off a target without Genji, but he's going to speed it up and he's going to make sure that he can roam around. Like, he's being picked on the best maps and the best comps. And like, we're actually seeing Genji doing what he needs to do. Where I think in like these lower divisions, they're just replacing their Sylvanas with a Genji. But when they replace their Sylvanas with a Genji, they don't have enough damage to finish targets, and they're just not killing anyone. And then they get a little bit behind, and Genji, if he's a little bit behind, it's going to feel weird because then you're charging people and just not quite doing enough to finish the target, and then you just die. And so I think that there's some trends that from the upper level that are going to go down that are kind of good trends. People more willing to draft a little bit more creatively. But then I think there's some trends that'll come down where people don't understand why it's a trend, and then it'll go down. I remember someone was telling me they were asking me why Diablo was gaining so much popularity with Lightning Breath. And this is in season 2, and I was saying, I was like, well, one, they've buffed like all of W build, so that just naturally works well with Lightning Breath. I said, but two, I said, every game we're seeing a Lucio, and I'm like, Diablo's really good at countering Lucio because he tries to wall ride, you smack him into the wall, flip him, your team kills him. So he has to play kind of at a disadvantage. I said, but Lucio can still just cleanse everyone if APOC goes off. And I said, so, and it's a lower cooldown than APOC. I said, so it's really hard for Diablo to get APOC value against Lucio. So we're seeing Diablos going really weird builds to answer Lucio, throwing Lightning Breath in because they can still answer Lucio. And then Lucio goes high five, you go Lightning Breath. Even if he high fives once, you're still taking a ton of damage. You're still probably winning whatever objective you're fighting over. And so sometimes there's trends that I think CCL picks up on very quickly, that the rest see the talents that are winning, but they don't know why they're winning, and they don't know why they're being picked. And so the trend goes down, but people don't really know why. And so I think that Diablo case is kind of a good example of why we're seeing Genji starting to be picked up again, but they don't know why they're being picked. They're just picking them because they're like, oh, well, CCL players are picking them, so I need to pick them. But sometimes you need to know the reason why. And so I think that we're going to see a lot of trends from this season of CCL specifically, because it is an interesting one. I feel like we're seeing a lot that we haven't seen before. But I think people don't really know the whys yet. And so we'll see a lot of trends.
Yeah, one thing I've certainly felt in my own home games, watching CCL, they do early pick Sylvanas, Tychus, Lunara, Falstad as well, but Falstad's been around for a really long time. But not as much Vala as HGC days, certainly not as much Greymane as HGC days. And I think that's interesting for their case. They're saying, I'm going to pick this thing that's amazing when things are held still for me. And then the rest of our draft is going to invest in that holding still. But in Storm League, you're thinking, man, what great siege potential. What a great tank buster this Tychus will be. And you don't get the front line that makes it sing. Nor do you have that dive, perhaps, that goes and cleanups what you started. You do tons of damage, but there's not that skilled Genji, perhaps. That's more in kind of the blame territory. The draft doesn't reinforce the early pick assassin. So what I'm seeing in our draft be affected is the supports are leading. Brightwing, Stukov, and Anduin is really kind of the backup there in our home games. And I do think it's interesting that in the CCL, they're backing up with a Deckard.
Yeah. And and again, that's something that I feel just a little bit of a critique. I love Deckard. I think Deckard's great. I said, but I think the problem that I'm seeing when they do pick like Deckard as a backup is the lack of cleanse. And again, that's something that like maybe CCL is slow to, or maybe they're realizing that like the cleanse heroes right now are just not reliable enough. The CC's coming out too often. But in this particular case of this game, like cleanse wouldn't have mattered against Entomb. And so like this one, I think Deckard's a great pick. So if Deckard starts being picked a lot in these situations, you got to kind of figure out like if that trend starts going down, are people going to first pick their healers but not know why, But yeah, no, I completely agree. Like with Tychus, Tychus, in my opinion, is like one of the best heroes if you can get a target safely into the middle of your team. Because of his low range but his high damage, he can kill anyone that can get into your team. So a good Dehaka that can land a tongue and pull someone into your team, Net's Tyke is a kill every time. A Stitch's Gorge, Garrosh Throw, anything that can get a target into your team. And so again, if you know like part of the reason you see that Tychus being picked kind of early after the Dehaka was already picked, then everyone thinks Tychus is really good. It like you said, you pick Tychus, but you don't have the other pieces, he's going to feel awful to play.
Something I think isn't going to translate down, but is a really powerful move, was Bad Benny's Varian. There's a lot of shakeups this season in terms of team dynamics and who's on what team. And we're seeing sometimes, like the case of Bad Benny, going, I'm new to this team, I'm tank player, what could I play that would be extremely clear on comms?
Yep.
Varian, Taunt Varian is going to work out perfectly while you're getting adapted to that situation. And in that sort of way, you brought up Lucio, and I had a thought. I wonder what % of our support players are EU. And maybe there's a lack of Lucio just because of ping.
It could be. I always figured he was kind of an easier one with low ping, only because most of his abilities are kind of point and click or just happen around you. I think like his trait usage gets really hard on high ping. But the rest of it like is kind of here and there. I think like that's kind of where Ana disappeared, and that was kind of my biggest reason for why Ana disappeared, is that she was being played a lot right before CCL season 1, and then right as CCL season 1 kind of started, she just dropped in popularity, and it was because the ping made it almost impossible to heal. And so you basically had a gimped healer that still had all the downsides of Ana, but didn't even have healing really, because of that high ping. And so Ana disappeared. And so you could be right that
well, looks like I'm wrong. Actually, I did a little quick through here. I know Valimar is said to be one of the top Lucios in the world right now. Canada. We got United States for Legacy, Weary Day, Canada.
Weary Day,
yep. United States heavy. So actually,
so I think these days for the healers, Yasu is EU, but the rest should be relatively NA. So I don't know if that's going to be the problem there.
Yeah,
I think it's mainly. I mean, Lucio's had a couple nerfs to his ult, and I think we're finally feeling that. And also like Stukov's just gotten a little bit more consistent, like we talked about earlier. Brightwing's always been pretty consistent. So I think, and Brightwing's also really hard to deal with as a bruiser, where like Ana's really easy to deal with as a bruiser. Brightwing can always just jump to someone else and give herself movement speed and just like spell resist, whatever you need. Like you can kind of get wherever you want to go with Brightwing. But Ana, like if you get jumped on by a Chen as Ana, you're kind of just dead if your team doesn't help. Like you can get a lucky sleep, but even a sleep, like can you get far enough away to where that Chen can't still get back up to you and still be able to heal your team? Probably not. Where a Brightwing, like Chen jumps on you, you just give yourself movement speed, poly him, and then jump to your team, and you're back to normal again. And so I think same thing with like Dehaka. Like it's really hard for Dehaka to kill a Brightwing. And same with Stukov. Stukov just pushes Chen away, just pushes Dehaka away, and he's hard to kill. And so I think that the current meta where it stands is really reinforcing these kind of battle mages almost as their healers. And Lucio still kind of fits that, but I think that just with the nerfs and the other ones that are available, it's just safer to go those. But I do think that there are some underrated ones still out there for sure.
Well, this is an interesting dynamic because we are on perhaps the eve of a patch. Now, of course, we were terribly unfair to poor devs and Daybringer this past week. I believe they got on the horn, they got on Reddit and said, hey, everybody, first of all, I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm holding back the patch. I want to make sure it's ready for everyone. Please be patient. We're really excited to show you what we're working on. That was Friday. And then Monday, everyone's like, all right, Daybringer, where's the patch?
Yeah.
Poor guy's just responds with a alarmed emoji face, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that he said in there, honestly, is what I always think of whenever there's a patch is like, specifically a content patch, not like just a balance patch, but a content patch. He said something and he basically said like, when you guys go to fix or add one thing, you never know how many things are going to go wrong, and it's always way more than you think actually went wrong. And he goes, then you try to fix one of those things that went wrong, and 14 more things go wrong. And like that's kind of paraphrasing what he said, but he said something like that. Like, but it goes, yeah, like the hold on, I've got my glasses, but yeah,
let's go ahead and read it in full. It is it was me personally that had to make the date change, and trust me, it breaks my heart too. We are so extremely excited to release the next round of content for this game. Unfortunately, it just isn't quite ready yet. Over my past 8 years on Heroes, oh my goodness, 8 years, I can confidently say that in game development, while extremely rewarding and fun, it's also unrelentingly difficult at times. If something can go wrong, it will. Not in the way you expect, but in 10 different ways that have never been seen before. So if you love chaos, please come join us. Rest assured that the Heroes team is diligently working on finalizing the next patch, and we will release it as soon as we can. Love you all, and greatly appreciate your patience.
Yeah, it's that second paragraph that just cracked me up. Like it's like you expect things to go wrong, but like they'll go wrong in 10 different ways you've never seen before. And it's like you can't I think more than ever too, like I really like Spazzo and some of the work that he's done for the community by kind of pointing out the bugs and everything. But I feel like Spazzo's been more active since like the patches have calmed down than when they were intense, to the point that like you could imagine being a developer right now. Not only is the community all like waiting for the perfect thing, but they're all going to judge everything that you do, but also your entire game is going to be torn apart the second that you launch that patch, and you're going to have like a Reddit post of everything you did wrong within 7 minutes of launching that patch. You don't even know how he typed it so fast, but he did. And like that's the challenge, is like it's difficult. So you want to make sure that at least the game's not broken. Every single patch we've had out recently has had one major bug that either needed to have like a hero turned off or had to have a patch sooner than later. Maybe just brought out a patch as soon as they could, but it's been tough. So I feel for him. I do. And it sounds more like a content patch than it does a balance patch, which also is kind of good news and bad news. Good news, we're probably going to get something new, which is cool. I doubt it'll be a new hero yet. I expected they probably would have had a hero prepared for BlizzCon, which didn't happen. So we might see a hero in the next 2 months. But I don't expect it'll be this one, because it's kind of just a random time. We haven't even had a balance patch in a little bit. So it's probably just going to be like a content. Maybe they bring out a skin or two. Maybe it's just like a partially reworked hero. Either way, I'm excited to see what it is. But yeah, I felt bad when I read that second paragraph.
For sure. And everyone was raring this week to get that patch. So currently in game, we are at less than a week again, which puts us estimating out to that maybe Tuesday next week. But we just had a really interesting conversation about the meta that CCL is developing. And while they're banning things like Dehaka and Stukov, they're also inventing new things. So what do you feel if there was a balance patch, and maybe not in the like creative new toys sort of sense, but the balance patch that needs to happen, what would be on it?
I mean, for me, balance patches are kind of always the same. Look to see what the problems are in each level of play. And then look to see who's not being played in any of those areas and see if you can change it. One thing, I know this is a different game, but it's kind of similar in a sense, is League of Legends, when they do their patch notes now, they have they break down every piece into what the purpose of that was at what skill level. And so they have like their shortened patch notes that they'll post on, like, I think they're on Twitter usually. They'll have like orange means for pro play. And so if their patch has the little orange indicator, it's meant to only affect pro play. And then like purple is like high level play, blue is like middle, and then like I think it's like light blue or green that's like low level play. And so they know how it's happening. So for me, I would want to kind of do the same thing. If I was to be looking at this balance patch, I would go, okay, well, Dehaka's Lurker Strain in the highest levels of play is very strong. When it's used correctly in its right situation, we're looking at like a 70% win rate. Even in the areas where I was watching these games and going, okay, Lurker Strain was not good here, and Hero Soccer would have been better. Lurker Strain still holds its own. And so I would say that arguably, let's tone down the talents that brought these heroes out. Even the one, so we can kind of see it right here. You see on the, I get this is also a podcast. So if you're not seeing this, there's a orange thing that says for average, and it says from bronze to gold or iron to gold. Then it says purple is skilled, and it's from plat to diamond. And then elite is for like master challenger, and then gold, or like a yellowish color, is for pro play. And under each balanced hero where it says nerfs, it'll have a little indicator of what color it's going to be affecting underneath the hero symbol. And we kind of need to do the same thing. So if we were to go into, let's say, hot slogs, and we were to go by, if we were to go to like the statistics, hero and map statistics, and we sort by, let's say, bronze and silver, where I would say, I gotta remember how to do this. Here we go. All leagues. Let's go. Bronze, silver, gold. We're gonna see of kind of the highest played hero and the highest win rate hero. We're looking at like the Butcher. So we want to learn. Okay, why does the Butcher have such a high win rate in these low ranks? Is that something that we need to address? Then we would look at the lowest rank, or the lowest win rate, and we'd go Medivh, Genji, Yrel, Hanzo, Chen. Well, all of those are dominant in high ranks, so let's not touch them. But you might be able to find a way to buff a hero in their ease of play without necessarily buffing them overall. And I guess that's something that I would try to do. But as far as specific heroes, I just want to look at like top 3 played in each role and go, why, and can we adjust them a little bit? And then I want to look at the bottom 3 played in each role and go, why, and can we adjust it a little bit?
Yeah, I think we could deduce this sort of imagery like League of Legends has out of our current patch notes, because often there's a note about what level of play it's being pursued at. It's just interesting that League of Legends informs their audience immediately through an infographic like this. Also interesting to this, there's no skill coloring or denotion when it comes to buffs. Buffs are left alone. It's only the nerfs.
It's just the nerfs.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting because they're not saying that these won't affect everyone. They're saying this is the intention that we have. Like I try to do that in my patch notes video. I try to explain where I think it will impact the most. But I think they're just trying to do it from a, hey, this is why we're doing that. And I think that's something that's kind of interesting from a developer's standpoint is, hey, here's why we're making these changes, and here's where we expect it to hit the most. Where that's up to us to decide where it's actually going to affect. Because I mean, if it affects low ranks or high ranks, I mean, in this case, I think I like what they've been doing with the balance patch of buffing underutilized talents, because we're seeing new things come out. Like the new Lunara playstyle we're seeing is because of multiple buffs to underutilized talents. And that's what created this playstyle. It's a fun playstyle. It's different. It's like you got a new hero and you still have the playstyle of the old hero. And so that's the fun part about that. And so for me, every balance patch that I see buffs of underutilized talents, I'm always excited, because I'm like, is it enough to where I feel like it's going to make a difference? If so, let me try it. And if it's not, then I'll wait until it happens a little bit more.
Interesting. So there's nothing. So you brought up Dehaka just because of its prevalence. Is there anything you feel is just overall home game CCL OP needs to be changed?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I feel like, I mean, let's just out of curiosity, let's go into the overall hero stats. and let's sort by win rate. Let's sort by popularity, and I'm just curious. So Stukov's sitting at a 65% win rate with a 95% popularity in season 3, right? Let me double check that that's correct. Yeah. So Stukov, Dehaka 63%, 90% of games played, right? Like these are the areas where I would be looking. Lunara, 71% of the games, 56% win rate. 56% win rate to me is fine. In that, all honesty, I think that's fine. Brightwing, 42% win rate, 69 games. Inubarak, again, most of these that are being played, I'm not too worried about. Where I'm worried is that Stukov and Dehaka. They're being played in almost every single game that we're seeing, picked or banned in almost every single game that we're seeing, and they've got above a 60% win rate. So we would want to look at what makes the difference. Well, Dehaka gained his popularity again with Lurker Strain, with those buffs. So we would want to look at nerfing those. Do I have kind of my crutch about that talent? Sure. I don't think it's great in every situation, but it certainly is amazing in the situations that it's great, and that's quite a few situations. So that needs to be nerfed. If we were to go into overall hero stats, kind of look at the Stukov, let's find out where his problem is, right? Is there one talent in Stukov's that just is winning significantly more, right? Reactive's win rate went down to 40%. Low blow went up to 77%. So low blow, picking a level 1 talent, one choice at the beginning of a game, is setting your win rate to 77%. Now, it's only in a few games. So is that truly the problem? Maybe not yet. But I would say that's probably where we're going to start seeing the nerfs. Lurker Strain, low blow, and the rest of his kit is not too bad. Biotic Armor, 75% win rate. Vigorous reuptake, 50. One good spread, 50. But it could be still inflated from low blow. Growing Infestation, 77%. Targeted Excision, 66%. Like, again, probably still inflated by low blow. I would say the problem probably relates to low blow. And so that's kind of where I would say the first two areas that we would look. The rest of them, I would say potentially look at the problems where we're seeing Vikings being played in kind of as like they change the entire dynamic of the game whenever Vikings is picked. So what I would say is, while I don't know their current what's their current win rate right now for Vikings? Let's
100% one game play. No, they lost their one game in season 3.
So season 3 they've been played in one game and lost one. So we'll probably leave it. Probably won't worry too much about that one. But I mean, I don't think
what you're bringing up, like that is a consistent problem for people who take this game into tournament play. Is which heroes fundamentally change the game into a way they don't want to participate in. And often I hear Vikings, but more often than I hear Hammer. That's also because I hang out with Mockery, who is, a Tracer player. So of course. What about Abathur? He's been picked all season. Weird.
Yeah. So Abathur's struggling. Season 2, we saw a couple teams try to make Abathur work. And they did, but they also kind of showed their cards a little too early, right? So in season 2, Abathur had a 45% win rate. They showed their cards early. It was mostly Oxygen. They showed their cards early of how they're going to play Abathur, and they won their first few games against a couple different teams. But once teams realized what they were doing, they lost almost all the rest of their games in that season. And they showed their cards too early. Abathur, unfortunately, has turned into kind of a niche trick pick, rather than being a hero that is really strong in the meta. Now I believe he's still getting banned here and there in season 3, but overall the big problem with Abathur is, and it's been that he's been getting accidentally nerfed for too long. What I mean by that is, like, when they did the experience changes, he could no longer soak from a bush. And this is one example of it, but every time that they've been making slight changes to just Heroes of the Storm in general, he's kind of gotten the brunt of that on accident. And he's not getting buffed to compensate for all of these things. Like, they changed tower aggro. So tower aggro, whenever you deal damage to another hero under tower, they made it to where the tower aggro, at least the forts, would start attacking you. But while they did that change, that shouldn't affect Abathur by himself. But while they did that change, they changed the priority of things that would target from towers. And they changed the priority from being minions first to being summons first, which you'd think would be great for Abathur because he's got all of those little summons. Problem is that his ult is considered a summon. And that was another change that they made a little bit earlier. So if you were to summon your ult, I'm meaning the monstrosity, not the clone, the towers will always attack your monstrosity first, which makes it to where you lose all of that split push potential that you had before. You basically need to move. You can never attack a fort and keep your monstrosity. You'd have to wait for the minions to go first, and then your monstrosity will go in, and the first minion to die, it's going to switch back to your monstrosity again.
Yeah.
And so his split push from monstrosity got nerfed without them really thinking about it. His split soaking got nerfed without them really thinking about it. Now he has to cycle hats to be able to get the soak that he needs. Well, in his rework that he got, his mini rework, they made cycling hats a lot more difficult. So you used to be able to hat on a target, and with no cooldown, you could shield the target and hop off. Then they gave you a cooldown before you could hop off, and they gave you a longer cooldown in between throwing another hat on a different target. So he's gotten nerfed in 3 different ways that pretty much prevents him from being played and competitive in the way that he used to be played in every single type of playstyle. So now the only reason that you would be picking Abathur is for some kind of sneaky strat that might use like a gimmick of what he does. But even those are bad. If the tower change was different, then the playstyle that Oxygen came up with for Abathur of basically throwing your monstrosity in another lane and then stalling objectives, which was kind of their playstyle, which got them a couple wins with Abathur, that playstyle would be twice as good if that monstrosity wouldn't die the second that it got in front of a fort. And so really the big issue with Abathur is that he's been accidentally nerfed over and over and over and over, and they've never compensated for that. So, but the problem is if you buff Abathur too much, he's one of the most annoying things to play against. And so I've brought up some ideas on kind of how to not even my ideas, other people's ideas that I've just kind of popularized, I guess. But I mean, regardless of any of those, if they buff him, they need to find a way to buff him that doesn't make people hate him.
Well, tall order for sure. Interesting. I mean, certainly that, and I see your video here on your YouTube, Not Paradox. You included this with a Nova rework, which I think is also heavily requested. Now, there was a Nova game. It was used on Volskaya to farm turrets with Bribe and a Sylvanas in tow in order to empower those turrets. The enemy team ended up running like triple frontline, so the turrets could never decide what to attack, and it ended up not really working. But it was a really fascinating way to use current Nova. How would you go about fixing your Nova?
Yeah, I mean, so Abathur's a little bit different. I have a million ideas with Abathur because I was an Abathur main forever. I mean, Abathur was one of the reasons I had Grandmaster. Abathur was used when I was actually playing competitively. I was always the player that got moved over to Abathur. I have a million ideas on how to fix Abathur. I don't play Nova at all. I know that Nova needs to be reworked, but I don't know the best way to rework Nova. And the reason why is because kind of the similar issue. She's a stealth sniper that's annoying to play against. If you buff her too much, everyone's going to hate playing against her. And so in order to buff Nova, they have to rework her to remove some of her annoying aspects. The current playstyle of a Nova, and what I kind of talk about in that video, is that it's not what you would feel like Nova should be. You kind of play Nova right now more of, hey, I'm an annoyance rather than I'm a sniper from the future, right? you really are. You're summoning clones to dismount people in the rotations. You're using your nuke to farm.
Yeah.
And you are bribing things. And that's all you do on Nova if you want to play her at a competitive level. And so she's only used in like niche areas to annoy people to death. And the same was true with like Probius. I recommended people that there be a Probius rework only because he's just played so little in every single game mode that and every rank that I just felt like you would upset the least amount of people if you could make him more entertaining. And that least amount of people is funny. I looked up Masters in North America, and with Diamond and Masters in North America, 71% of all the games played by Probius were played by one guy. Like, imagine every game being played in 2 full ranks, and they're all played by one guy. Like, you can't do that with any other hero. Every other hero in the game, you can find like several people that are still playing that hero in several different ranks. But like the fact that there's one, and the last like 29% were played by like 4 people. So like Probius, you'd upset the least amount of people by reworking him, and you would probably encourage the most to try a new hero by giving him a rework. I think Nova, you'd probably upset a few people for sure. I think Abathur, you'd upset quite a few people. I mean, that's again, Abathur's one of my favorite heroes in the game. I just feel like throughout all the changes, he's been made less and less enjoyable for each change. Sure, you can kind of play around each of those changes, but like it's kind of like, I don't know. It's like if you're walking to the store and like you can go straight to the store on a sidewalk the whole time, and that's great. And then they add like a bush in the way, or like a tree starts growing in the way, and now you need to kind of step in front into the street. Sometimes it's like, that's really annoying. But if it's just one thing, it's not a big deal. You can kind of play around it. But when it happens multiple times, they basically just leave the street and the sidewalks falling apart. And that's how Abathur feels right now, where it's basically you're like walking in the road the whole day and just trying to get to the store. You know, it just doesn't feel good to play.
I
And
get that.
so
Yeah, overgrown.
most of the reworks that I'm recommending are either heroes that just like feel awful now, or heroes that like, in order to buff them, you're going to make them awful to play. And to play against anyways. So with Probius, I was like, he's just outclassed, right? Like his abilities are slower than every other mage. So if you're just following up a taunt, he could get a kill if you're following up a taunt, because his abilities are slow, but they're taunted there for a little bit. But so can Orphea and Jaina and KT and both KTs, and really just about anyone else. Any other mage can follow up a taunt and lead to a kill. But they can also do so much more. Probius is more about zone control, which is awesome, except for Gazlo kind of does it better right now. And so it's like he's in this weird boat where like the only people playing him are people that just really enjoy his playstyle, and not that he outclasses anyone in really any direction. I think he's also, his talents feel more like a support, but his abilities feel more like a damage or specialist. And so he just fits really weird, which I think is okay. I like weird heroes. I just want to make sure that he has at least a niche that he fits well enough to where we see him being played and we enjoy playing him in at least one area. So all of the reworks that I've recommended have been mainly just that. It's either heroes that are really hard to balance, heroes that nobody's playing, or heroes that just aren't fun to play anymore for a reason. They're either not fun to play or just really not fun to play against for whatever reason.
I think Nova is interesting. The Precision Strike farm feels against the fantasy, but in a rework land, it could be kind of fun to feel like you're the ground troop and the space invasion force above you is backing you up. Like, you're the hero of your story, but all around you, the jets are flying in, and you got to get across the ground as the solo, stealthy insert into that dramatic situation.
Yeah. I mean, but almost like at that point, like make it like base kit almost. Like make her nuke do like nothing to heroes, and then make it to where it's you have a global like wave clear, and then you take your ult to buff it. You know, if that's what people like about it, and that's kind of what they've been doing a little bit, is like people liked Murden's like Pierce on Q, so they made it baseline. They liked the longer range of the hook on Stitches, so they made it baseline. So if that's the part that they like about Nova, where she has like, hey, you're kind of calling in like two different, you're more of a strategist than you are a sniper, then let's play on that. Let's make that more of her identity of a hero, and kind of make it work more. And so I think that's where you can do stuff like that. But at a point, yeah, you're just turning her into Abathur.
That's true. That's true.
I'm like, you're an Abathur with a body, but that's easier to balance because you can kill a body. I mean, like Abathur, after like 16 minutes in the game, you're basically just staying in base. So
a fascinating issue. There are still like less dramatic things that kind of still get to me, but that's just because I love Thrall and his bouncing chain lightning being very scary to use around any fort because it gets mad at me because it always wants to go off and hit a hero. It'd be interested to see that stuff revisited and maybe cemented into the future where these buildings now have that aggro system. And you mentioned the summons there, that would be interesting too. There's heroes that don't suffer though, like Lunara, like Splinter Spear. Like you have the range. It's not as scary as monstrosity. So you let loose some poison. Whoops, hit a hero, do a little jump back in, no problem.
Yeah, no, I think some of them it's not a big deal, and it is something that you just play around. There have been some that are kind of annoying. I don't remember what hero I was playing, but it was something kind of like Dehaka, where I was trying to speed up my clear on the fort, and I did my W, and then I had someone just walk up. And the same thing happens like any of the fire. You're playing a Nubarak, right? You summon a bunch of beetles that are tanking for you, and all they have to do is stand next to a beetle, and the fire will hit them for literally like 6 damage.
And that's your fire, so it goes...
and that's and so there's a lot that like it's kind of counterintuitive, because it's like I don't know what they could do to kind of make that easier. I mean, with monstrosity, they could count it as a hero. And if they count it as a hero, then it at least would be moved down in priority. I think the rest of the problems aren't too big of a deal. If you're tanking as a Nubarak, like you're already a tank, so your beetles just last a little bit longer. You can always step back. Your beetles will just start tanking again. But yeah, there's a lot of like little things that when they made that change, I think for the most part it was a good change. Kind of prevented people from diving so early. Especially like people that could just summon a bunch of beetles, dive in and kill someone and have the beetles still tanking everything. Like Nubarak, sure, he got hit the hardest from that, but that was kind of the reason why, is because he was the biggest abuser of being able to dive under tower, summon a million beetles around him and just kill the target and walk away. But yeah, I definitely think that I don't know. I don't like recommending reworks too much, only because I've been in the boat where they've reworked heroes that I've enjoyed playing, and I no longer enjoy playing them. Whitemane and Tassadar are good examples of that. I think new Tassadar is fun. Don't get me wrong. I think the new Tassadar is definitely more fun. But I did like the old playstyle of being able to like focus on shields and walls and not do very much damage. And Whitemane, on the other hand, was the one that that's a topic, right? Like that's a topic for me. But so I understand, like when I recommend reworks, I know there's going to be people out there that are like, don't change this hero. I love its current playstyle. But I'm like, yeah, but you and like 3 other people have their playstyle, and then otherwise it's like we don't even have that hero in the game. And so it's hard, because it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's easier for them to rework a hero because all the assets already exist than it is for them to make a new hero. And so if we're going to get any new content in like if we're going to get faster content that's new content, I think rework's going to be the easiest for them to do.
Definitely. And that's why I think Probius is such a example of getting some art assets out of the closet, which isn't true because he's playable today, but he doesn't match the fantasy for a lot of people. But, you know, my cautionary tale is always murky. The number of murky original players that completely left this game entirely. Like that was their purpose to playing. Also, Zul rework did that for quite a few people, which is a little different. I feel like it gave them a lot of life, but I understand there was this sort of relaxing skeletal push that you would just do forever and didn't really worry about team fights or how you interacted with the rest of the map. And a lot of AI players perhaps lost their interest in the game on that one.
There was one, I mean, like Sylvanas, I had a play style of Sylvanas that I really liked. And it was, I would always play with an Ariel, and I would just go W build. And old Sylvanas used to have like 3 W talents that all were really funny. One was like, your W, every time that it spreads to another person, it lowers its cooldown. It's doubled if it's a hero. And if there were 5 people standing around, you'd have no cooldown on W. And so I'd play with an Ariel, and she would always have her energy bar no matter what, because I'd throw my W, it'd spread to everyone, and I'm just doing a ton of like nothing damage, but Ariel's energy bar would literally just be like whoop. And then so we would play together, and it was always just a fun combo. And then like you had the point and click mind control where you both stood still, which was like considered awful, but like it did give you the ability to like, hey, they're all together, like just we're just gonna keep Ariel keeping everyone alive. They start spreading out, I'm just gonna grab one and we're gonna get a kill. And it was kind of a fun play style, and it's gone now. But I think new Sylve did bring a lot more to what you can do with Sylve, and she's a lot scarier. So I don't know, I think for the most part the reworks that they've done have made the heroes more popular, with the exception of two, which was, and I could be wrong on this, but I think Joanna and Whitemane. Whitemane, you can see literally the patch that she had before the rework. She's being played in like 49% of games. And then two weeks later, so after people got some time to play it, the patch that was like 2 weeks later, she was being played in like 6% of games. And then after that, she was being played in like 2% of games. And it was like Whitemane had like the largest drop on hers. And the same thing happened with Joanna, her latest rework. She was being played in like 50 to 60% of games, and it dropped down to like 20%. After playing it more, I don't actually mind her current iteration, honestly. I kind of like that. I mean, her talents are a little like, they need a little bit of like, what's the word? Like, I think her underutilized talents need a hand, just a little bit of a bump in the numbers. But otherwise, I think that there's a lot of potential with her current iteration. So I don't dislike it anymore. I actually kind of like it. But yeah, I think everyone's kind of warmed up to Joanna currently.
I'm definitely looking from the outside when it comes to Whitemane, but of all that was our most World of Warcraft moment this game has ever had, where the community's saying, don't do it. We know what you're trying to do, and it's not going to work. Please don't go through with this. And they did anyway, and I don't think that was villainous, as it's often portrayed for the World of Warcraft team. Mm-hmm. I think it was done with the best intentions to make Whitemane more interesting to more people. But instead, the hardcores didn't like it, and we lacked any sort of example for why you should work that hard to get good at her. And I think the same thing happened with Sylvanas in a sense too. Like, it's taken 2 years for me to be like, oh, mind control's amazing.
Oh yeah.
But if we were in HGC days, we would have communicated that thing. Speaking on that very briefly, I love the John Wickian endings we are having to CCL right now. Like, both teams are exhausted. They're professionals, they're tournament players, but they're not marathon runners. They're not used to playing this game for 8 hours straight like our old HGC pros. So they get to game 5 and they're just trading exhausted punches back and forth, and the seams are showing, but I love it. It's so human and fascinating.
Yeah. You know what was so interesting? I think it was last weekend or the weekend before. Both almost all the series of games ended in 3-0s, but it didn't feel that way. It felt every single game went to like level 24. Like every single game went to like level 24. They were all 3-0s, but like, so if you're looking back, you'd be like, oh, like that all 3-0s like must have been a fast week. It wasn't. Every game was like 20 to 30 minutes long, and it was crazy to see. I mean, every game was so close. You would look at the standings of these teams and you'd be like, oh, this is going to be so easy. But only a couple changes, a little bit more practice, and these teams are actually pretty close to each other, at least from what I was watching. The games were they were surprisingly close, and like you said, there's so many of these ends where they were so close. I mean, level 20 to level 20 or higher anyways. And I mean, I was watching there was one all track game, and there was one keep up for both teams, and that was it. And it's just like, this is interesting. Like, I get some people are saying, oh, like it's because of the changes and stuff, it's harder to end earlier. But you'd be surprised. There are still teams that are closing out games like in EU, and when we were seeing the Chili Mountain Korean events, They were still closing out games really early on teams that were better, that they're against teams that were a little bit worse than them, or that they were a little bit better. But yeah, CCL, these games are going long and they are close. They come down to just like a pick that happens slightly before a fight. And that's it.
I'm really excited. In particular, this weekend it'll be November 13th. So the Saturday games are going to have Granite Gaming versus Chili Mountain. Both teams are 0-6 right now, and not because they just got rolled. That's just the way the end of the game went. And I'm really fascinated to see, because I know both these teams are working so hard right now to fix that and to solve the issues with their communication and work with their new rosters. It's going to be a really cool throwdown there. But we were talking about, Whitemane and the like, and chat's been talking about Johanna here. What an interesting scenario that was. It was a relief for so many tank players. Like, and I'm going to be extreme here, which is you ruined her. Thank goodness. Now I don't have to play it every game.
Yeah, I think it's
not true.
It's kind of a weird thing, because it's like they could have just nerfed her. Well, she didn't need it. Like she had a baseline win rate in every single mode, in every single level of play. She had a baseline win rate. But like she had a couple different build variations, but they were so old that like people have just been playing them for so long.
Yeah.
She was like ETC for a while. It was like ETC and Johanna, and then like they kind of nerfed ETC's health a little too much, and then it was Johanna and blank. And whatever else other tank filled in, it was just Johanna and blank. And it's just tricky because like there's a lot of talents in there that are just kind of dead. Divine Fortress is just like no one really wants to take it because the lone part is so bad, or the gambit part is so bad. That it's such a risky thing, and they made it worse compared to what the older version of it was to compensate for the extra stats that you'd get. It's tricky to know where to put Johanna right now. So Laws of Hope is generally what's picked. Zealous Glare is I like it if you know you're going to get to 16, or if you're going against someone who's going to be standing still. Like in the competitive scene, people have been picking it against Tychus and Zul'jin. Because they're basically going to be standing still and attacking, and so when they're standing still, you blind them, and you're kind of turning off Tychus for a little bit. It's long enough range you can hit Zul'jin or even Odin. So yeah, I mean, but her builds are kind of straightforward. Like Eternal Retaliation's not picked very much. It's not too good. Subdue's being picked in most games. Hold Your Ground only really against Garrosh's or people that you're worried you have to kind of eat a CC for your team. And then Conviction's picked in almost every game. Level 7. Sins Exposed is only really being picked by I think Bad Benny. And Falling Sword, I mean, I think both ults are still really good. Yeah, I think both ults are really good, but man, if you could get to Heaven's Fury, that game is over.
Yeah. And Falling Sword, much like our Lunara talk, has opened up more cleanseless supports, which has been really exciting.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's a tricky one because in itself, it's actually pretty bad. You can see of the games that get to Heaven's Fury, it's an 80% win rate. But in the games that in every game of Falling Sword, it's only 50% win rate. Meaning if you don't get to 20, it's like a 30% win rate ult. And that's what's pretty bad about it, is it's not that great of an ult by itself. Its cleanse is good, but if you're using it for a cleanse, you're kind of failing what a tank should be doing, which is like engaging or punishing mistakes the enemies are making. And so you're picking a bad ult hoping for level 20, which, as we saw in CCL, a lot of games were hitting 20. And so it can be a really powerful ult. But if you think that the game's going to close out earlier, you just need that CC faster. Blessed Shield's still just sitting there casually with 100% win rate in CCL.
Interesting. Almost too, there's like a Muradin eating the lunch of Johanna thing going on right now, where he's become the premier anchor tank with the stuns available without having to farm, able to sit in bushes for longer now and keep an eye out, and his block talent and build being one of his more focused builds.
Yeah.
Means that Johanna, the blinds, you got a Murd and he does the blind thing, but instead he absorbs it. And it's kind of working out for everybody.
Yeah, I think Job's blind it's nice because like with the bruisers that we have right now, it's you can blind a carry no matter who they're attacking, where like Murden's block is more just like, hey, his other talents aren't doing so hot right now. Murden's so weird because when he got his mini rework, he just lost so much damage. And so now you're risking a lot to throw any talent points in damage, and it's easier to just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to play a tank that I can be one of the best anchors in the game. And that's about it. You're a tanky tank. You're probably the tankiest of the tanks with Murden and his current iteration. Your engage allows you to engage over walls, which is pretty nice, and it allows you to anchor in really rough areas and then just jump over a wall and you're safe. But yeah, Murden in his current spot is interesting. You don't get the reliable engage, but it's gotten a little bit more reliable now that people are taking the level 7 instead of the level 7 80% slow jump, instead of taking the damage talents. Again, now these Murdens are basically taking no damage talents because once they changed his like level 1, you just don't do as much as you used to. So you're seeing a lot more heavy impact these days. You're seeing Skullcracker just for the CC, and you're barely seeing Give Him the Axe anymore, which used to be the meta. We'll go Skullcracker to kind of interrupt. Like it's really good against like Chen, just getting those extra interrupts off. It's really good against like Sonya spinning. Just any free interrupts. It's also not too bad for damage, and it's just also kind of annoying if you're trying to get away from a Murden and he's just kind of getting those stuns off here and there. It's just annoying to get away from. But yeah, Murden, he's kind of just turned into okay, we need a tank that's really tanky so that we can kind of do whatever else we want with our comp. But he is still struggling quite a bit in CCL right now.
Well, as we start to reach the end of the show, let's go ahead and take an email. We'll take one from De La Soak here, who asks, you mentioned you've climbed to GM in every role and tank was the fastest climb. How? Did it require pings, chat, or both? Or did you just play well and vary up your tank picks depending on the league?
Yeah, so what I'll say is when I have gone to Masters on different roles, I initially did it on support on my main account, and it took a long time. I did it again on a different account, and it wasn't the slowest. I was playing Rhaegar and mainly just doing macro in the early like low levels, and then when I got up to the higher levels, at the time I want to say I was playing Stukov most games and just doing roots leading to kills, looking for mistakes, right? And it didn't take too long. Tanks has been the fastest every time, and I think the reason why is because in low ranks all you really have to do is macro. You just have to be better at macro than everyone else, and wave clear is generally the easiest thing to do in low ranks, as a tank anyways, because if you're trying to wave clear as like Jaina in low ranks, and there's someone sitting in every lane, which there should be but generally isn't, you're going to take damage in every lane you try to double soak. Where if I'm playing Joanna and I'm double soaking, or I'm playing Blaze and I'm double soaking in the low ranks, I can do it pretty safely without needing to worry too much about what's going on. Then when I get to high ranks, you control the flow of battle. And I always say, like in Masters, everyone throws at least 3 times, right? And so if you control the flow of battle, and for the most part in low ranks, people don't really understand flow of battle. If you move back as a tank, your team's still going on and they're just going to die. But in high ranks, if you move back as a tank, generally people will move back with you. And then you kind of go in, and like, I just felt like I controlled the flow of battle a little bit better. I knew what fights to take, and I would win about 70% of my games all the way through like Diamond and Masters playing tank. Where if I'm playing like Assassin, I could probably win like 60%. And it could be that I'm held back by my mechanics. In with Assassins, it's a lot harder to play Assassin heroes to the highest level because you need to be like actively stutter stepping and landing all your abilities. I'm not the greatest with my mechanics. So I think it was a lot easier for me to carry with tanks because it was more of just like macro in the lower ranks and flow of the battle in the higher ranks. Bruiser was okay, but I think it also came down to I'm not a Bruiser player primarily. The low ranks I moved up very quickly, but the high ranks I didn't know all the matchups. And so when it got to the maps that were pretty like specific to knowing the matchups, I also didn't own a lot of heroes on the Smurf account. So what would happen is I would get to the high ranks and someone would play something that I just didn't have the roster pool to deal with. Like they'd pick Chen and I had nothing in my roster pool that could answer Chen. And so sometimes it was easy for me to play a bruiser play something other than a bruiser in the solo lane and then just to like go roam and kill the bot lane or something, you know, because I could never deal with like a Chen that was on the point. So I would just play something else. So I think that as far as bruisers, that's where I hit my limitation. Right about plat diamond, where people kind of knew the matchups, I just didn't have the roster pool to answer it. Where the tanks that are the best at controlling the flow of the fight are cheap, right? Joanna, ETC, Diablo, they're all so cheap. They're all like 2,000 gold, 4,000 gold. So you'd have whatever your free week tanks are, and then you'd spend like just the gold it takes to get an account to 50. You have all the best tanks. And healers are a little different. You end up with like Lily and Malfurion. Stukov's a little expensive. Lucio's expensive. You could get Rhaegar. So it's like you could kind of make it work. But yeah, Bruisers is probably the slowest I had. It was the fastest to about Diamond, and then it was the slowest to Masters, where Tanks was fast the whole way through. I did my tank bronze to Masters in a weekend. And yeah, it was a pretty fast one.
Wow.
And my healer one, my actual healer one, not my just main account. My main account took me like 2 seasons. But my healer one, when that was my actual intention, I knew I could already hit Grandmasters. My healer one, I think it took 2 weeks. And then the solo lane one took me a month or two. It definitely, the different roles makes a difference. But if you already own the heroes, it's more of a mindset. It's more of like learning what you're doing wrong and having the mindset that you can get there. Because I find that like a big problem is that my first time going to Masters, I really threw myself off every time. I would lose a game. I would feel like, oh, I'm done. I need to change something. Where if you've already hit Masters, you know what you're doing will get you to Masters again. So if you lose a game, you don't throw off your strategies, right? You do what you know will always win. And that's why these Smurfs can not care if they lose a game. They go 70% win rate all the way up. It's the mindset to know that you can get there. And so once you get there the first time, it's actually really easy to keep doing it because you don't second guess what you're doing. You know what you're doing will get you to Masters in a matter of time, and a couple losses here and there don't throw you off. And so I would say that's probably the biggest issue with tanks is like, it's the mindset. It really is like, it's just that mindset.
Well said. And that'll bring us to the end of this episode. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for it. And thank you for joining us, Not Paradox. It was fun having you again.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me back. No, I appreciate it. It's been a little bit, and I'm excited to be back. And I'm excited to watch you guys' 400th next week. And yeah, no, thanks so much for bringing me back.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for those 400 episodes to the patrons over at patreon.com/ITN. We want to thank our producers, Declan H., Sean B., Mike R., and J.M. Tibbles. Oh my goodness, 400 episodes. Thank you all for your endless support of the show. And everyone who has subscribed over at patreon.com/ITN. You can catch the show live Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern. Today we're over on my channel at twitch.tv/Kyle Fergusson, but normally over at twitch.tv/AMoveTV. Before I outro a bit more, let's have our guests tell everyone where they can be found.
Sure. So I'm Not Paradox, if you didn't already know. And most people know me from my YouTube content. I make Here's a Storm videos ranging from kind of the lowest ranks all the way up to the highest. I make videos talking about like the 4 mistakes you might be making if you're playing in like lower ranks or just picking up a hero for the first time. And I also have games where I break down the highest levels of professional play, where I explain how they're playing this hero, why they're playing this hero, and how you can take this hero into your own games. and play it to your best. So you can check out my YouTube at youtube.com/notparadox. I also do a bunch of other stuff, but I kind of all over the place. So you can find all the rest of my stuff on my website, notparadox.com. It's not that up to date, but at least you can find like my Facebook and everything there. But yeah, no, that's kind of the best place to find me. Other than that, if you guys have any questions, you can always tag me in the into the Nexus Discord, and I generally will stay around there and answer any questions you might have.
Excellent. You can find everything about this show over at amove.tv. When Garrett is here, you can find him at Garrett Art. He'll be back next week. This week, I want to point everyone towards our YouTube, Nexus Gaming News. You can find it at youtube.com/amovetv. So the old channel resurrected for general gaming news. And this past week, we hit a little milestone for ourselves as we invade YouTube with our content. We have a 11,000 viewed video on Final Fantasy XIV. And
Ooh.
yeah, both Garrett and I have been playing through that and kind of getting into it a bit. So expect more Final Fantasy XIV content over on that YouTube. You can find everything I do over at kylefergusson.com, and you can find me playing Heroes over at twitch.tv/kylefergusson, which until that patch hits will continue to be whimsical, full of Mephistos and Stukovs and Sylvanuses with little rhyme or reason as to why they're picked. But I'm certainly enjoying myself. Thank you all for joining today. We'll see you next time. Good luck, have fun.
All right, thank you guys.